Hey, everybody, what is up? It is me, Mike Vanderpool, with the Make It Happen podcast. I have a very special guest here today, Gary Thompson, the Executive Vice President from RGP, aka Regional Growth Partnership. They are an organization here in Northwest Ohio, kind of and I'll let you explain it, Gary, the arm of Jobs Ohio in our neck of the woods here. But Gary has been making the rounds here over the past week or so, talking to folks about the data centers and the opportunity and honestly some of the things that are considered threats here in Northwest Ohio regarding data centers. Gary, pleasure to have you here. Pleasure to have this conversation with you, get to know more about you, a little bit more about RGP, and then obviously answer and ask some of the questions around these data centers moving into our neighborhood. So glad to have you here, Gary.
Mike, glad to be here. It's a great opportunity. Appreciate it very much.
So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself to get us started here so we know who we're talking to?
Sure. So I've been born and raised here in Northwest Ohio. I was born in Toledo. I'm a graduate of Morrison R. Wade High School. I'm a graduate of the University of Toledo. I'm a certified public accountant. I maintain that license. And during my career, I had the chance to do public accounting and industry accounting, and found myself getting into sales, and sales led into economic development. I did a stint tour duty up in Farmington Hills, Michigan for an architectural firm in sales. And really that kind of design and engineering work you do project by project really is kind of the same work that gets done for economic development. It's just done community by community or industrial park by industrial park. So it's kind of a natural fit for me to step into a role at economic development. And I began that career at the city of Oregon at the Oregon Economic Development Foundation. And I followed my boss from there to the Regional Growth Partnership when Jobs Ohio was created. And the RGP was tasked to be the Northwest Ohio regional partner for Jobs Ohio. So I was employee number one under that circumstance at the RGP. And so kind of have seen it all from start till now. So it's been a great ride, and we hope to help things keep growing here in Northwest Ohio.
And can you give us a little bit of just the summary of Jobs Ohio and RGP, like how, without being the long winding story it may be, right? Yeah. How did it come about, and what's its purpose?
Well, so the regional group, the RGP, there's a lot of groups around and really predate Jobs Ohio.
Okay.
Jobs Ohio was created by John Kasich when he was governor, and decided, hey, we can privatize certain functions of economic development and make it work a little bit better. And frankly, I think that's been true. There are still a few functions that the Ohio Department of Development keep under their purview, like the Ohio Jobs Creation Tax Credit that's in statute, but the Department of Development and Jobs Ohio work very well together. And instead of having a big bureaucracy of people in Columbus that don't understand regions, John Kasich's idea was, hey, we have these regional groups through the state. They understand the names of their streets and how they're pronounced and what communities want growth and what communities need help. And why don't we just use that local knowledge and expertise? So they created this thing called the Jobs Ohio Network. And what's great about that is it really has allowed us to get to know our neighbors a lot better. We've always kind of known them, but the folks at Team Neal out of Cleveland and the Dayton Development Coalition, the counties that are in Northwest Ohio border their counties. So we do a lot of work back and forth. Companies may move from one county to the next county because they're growing and expanding, but they get to keep their workforce that way. So a building could be 2 miles apart in address, but it could be in different counties. Or you could have a community like Bellevue that's, in different counties as well, or Fostoria that's in 3 different counties.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of interaction amongst the network partners has been, I think, a great strength for our entire state, and really helped the state growth throughout the area. And finally, what it did is Jobs Ohio, we have a contract with them to provide services. So we have boots on the ground throughout Northwest Ohio that understand the region and can be at a meeting, rather quickly to talk to a company or an opportunity or a site visit, where before Jobs Ohio, we'd have to wait for people from Columbus to either clear their schedule, get time on their schedule, make the trip up here. And when they were there in the meeting, it was, nothing against people from Columbus, but they just weren't of the local flavor. They didn't understand how things worked in Northwest Ohio. So that kind of local knowledge really helps us put deals together better.
And so we've got RGP has, I believe, 90 members that are all different industries, businesses in Northwest Ohio as part of your group.
Yeah, our private funding, and again, we're a private organization. We're not a government entity. We don't take any taxpayer dollars. We're funded by the business community in Northwest Ohio. And as you said, there's about 90 of those members. Some of them are institutional, like, say, the University of Toledo, Bowling Green State University, all the banks in the region, many manufacturers, a lot of construction companies, a lot of architectural and engineering kind of companies. They're the kind of companies that benefit from economic development directly. When projects happen, they might get the chance to design a facility and benefit indirectly because if you're Owens Corning, you want to be part of a growing and a vibrant community and have a growing economy because it helps attract talent that can serve your world headquarters labor force. So everybody kind of wins one way or another if you're involved in the RGP.
So you're a little bit of the middle person between our regional industries organizations and the needs and the folks over in Columbus, and it kind of goes both ways.
That's correct. That's correct.
Awesome. So speaking of things that are impacting Columbus and also Northwest Ohio, let's we don't want to bury the lead too far, but let's talk about these data centers. They are a pretty fascinating topic of conversation, especially in the world of AI. I think data centers and AI are both front of mind here in some of our conversations, but honestly, they've been around for a long time. Data centers, really are just buildings full of computers at the end of the day. So we can demystify them a little bit, but then also let's demystify some of what's going on here. I know we've got Meta just came in within the 6 months and presented and talked about what's going on over in Wood County. So I know a little bit about that, but then, I'm hearing rumblings in Oregon. I live in White House and Waterville. Oh my goodness, there's some conversations going on in there. So, what can you tell me from your perspective, RGP, what is the data center that we're talking about now, or data centers that we're talking about now? What are those? What do they look like?
Yeah. So as you probably know better than me, Mike, right? There's lots of different kind of data centers. I like to always point to, there's an Ohio Bell building at the corner of Heather Downs in Detroit, in Toledo, Ohio. That's probably the first data center that was ever in the region, because it was where all the fiber cables and the phone cables all came into a central junction switchboard, and fiber and data computer chips kind of grew out of there. So we've been dealing, as you said, with data centers for a long time. There's a lot of data centers that don't make sense for Northwest Ohio. If we think about edge data centers, the kind of data center, it's a little smaller in capacity, but it serves a major market. I always like to say, as an example, it might hold the top 10 Netflix movies that get rented or streamed during the weekend. Those have to be very close to their market because latency matters a lot.
And hence the term edge means that they're kind of at the edge of the line and serving.
Correct.
Yeah.
There's disaster recovery data centers. Those tend to be out in the middle of nowhere in Wyoming and away from earthquakes, all those kinds of things. And anytime you get into an urban area, we've had a few companies look at Northwest Ohio for that, and they see the little county regional airport as a threat. So there are just too many threats that those kind of data centers don't work as well either. And then there's co-location data centers, which can be big or small. And so they can be the size of, an office building, or they can be the size of a regional airport. If you're talking about a hyperscale data center campus. And really where Northwest Ohio has its best strength, and I'll give you a little history on this, is the AI hyperscale campus. It's the biggest investment. It creates the most jobs. It gives communities in the region the most bang for its buck. And we're perfectly suited to host those here should communities want to do that. And I'll back up just a second. If I go back, say 5-6 years, when data centers really started to kind of like, hey, these are popping around the country, we ought to think about this. At that point, name your hyperscale name, right? The Googles, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Metas, the all those big companies, they were interested in green power and green power only. So as we talk to them about our natural gas assets or nuclear power plants, or they're like, no, it's got to be green power. And that kind of lasted for about 2 years. And then they needed kind of 200 acres and that kind of, so it's an ever evolving need. And with the kind of race to AI is what kicked this in gear. And one of the things that makes AI unique is AI data centers can go anywhere there's power. That latency issue doesn't matter to them. So they can be here in Northwest Ohio, or they can be at the North Pole if we can get power to the North Pole. The reality is we have the ability to make power. And when we talk about a lot of past issues with data centers, hey, they're going to take all the power off the grid. Even in Columbus, Ohio, there are parts of Columbus, Ohio that struggle with AEP as utility. We just can't get that kind of megawatts. Well, they don't have the natural gas infrastructure in Columbus, Ohio that we do in Northwest Ohio. So our approach has always been, as we talk to these companies, you need to either have someone build a power plant for you, or we're going to build a power plant for you, or you need to build your own power plant so that you're not taking power from the grid. If I go back 3 years, I talked about green energy. That's called behind the meter power, when you build it for yourself and you don't connect to the grid, or island mode. When we talked about that situation with these hyperscalers, now we got to be connected to the grid. And there were 2 reasons they want to be connected to the grid. One was, I would say, the perception of reliability and redundancy. And 2, the grid offers, for example, if you're a First Energy connected, 12% of First Energy's generation portfolio that flows through the lines is green power. So they can immediately say, we have green power and we have all this reliability.
Gotcha. Okay.
I'm going to pause there because there's more to say about that, but I'm going to see if you want to ask any more, clarify that.
Well, I'm going to take a sidestep and just really clarify what data centers are, at least globally, and why they exist, like for the general audience, right? So this idea of cloud computing, which is what all of your Google Docs, your mics, everything is now, air quotes, in the cloud, which is just a bunch of servers all over the universe at this point, right? Or the known universe at this point for us. And those servers, those computers all being connected is what allows us to pull up our Google Docs or our Facebook on this phone here and at my house, my work computer, or if I travel across the country or across the world, I'm still accessing kind of the same information because of the structure of these data centers that are collecting and storing and distributing all of our information. So the fact we have so many of them partially affords us the opportunity to have redundancy within our systems. So, which is why when we have the disaster recovery ones, that's kind of like the backup of the backups, right? If crap hits the fan, we at least have some version of to be able to do probably at least the basic tasks that we need to do to run our economy and protect ourselves.
Yeah. It was funny. I had a conversation with somebody not too long ago, and they said, I don't understand why you have to build all these buildings. I mean, all this stuff goes to the cloud. The person literally thought
the cloud is on the ground. That's the deal, right?
I said, no, the cloud is that building that you drive by, whether you're in New Albany, Ohio, or Omaha, or Cheyenne, Wyoming, or down the street from wherever you may be. That data center is the cloud. Yeah.
Yeah. The clouds are on the ground, right? And as more of the tools that we use connected to the cloud, and especially with AI and how much it's data it's using and how much it's computing, right? Like when a computer runs through and does its operations, it's called compute. So you have your data storage, then you have your compute, which is the processing power to get the data to do cool stuff. These data centers now, with the boom of AI, just to your point, we need more of them. And they're looking for the places, just like every business would, location. Yeah. Let's find a location that can serve people well and where we have access to the resources we need in order to be able to operate efficiently. Is that fair to say?
And that is fair to say. And just to give you an example, so when it comes to power, right? If you go and just did a regular Google search, I was at a conference and somebody expressed, that Google search uses enough power to power an incandescent light bulb for about 11 seconds. Mm-hmm. If you go to ChatGPT and do that same search, that search uses enough power to charge your cell phone twice, from a dead battery to a full battery. So that's the kind of difference that occurs. And one of the things about the need, right? I mean, let's just, so national security is a need, right? All those kinds of things. And we've talked about the integrated war fighter, whether it's drone technology, they're controlling all these things from a glass inside their helmet, and we need to be able to make those decisions faster than the enemy. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming there's people at DARPA and the Navy and the Art that are dealing with that and taking care of that. But here in Northwest Ohio, where we have a manufacturing and agricultural economy, right? Yeah. Almost everything you touch, if you're driving down the road and you're using GPS, you're using a data center, right? Manufacturers not only, did we have the big data, right? They're collecting data on everything that goes in and out of their plant. They're weighing everything. That's how manufacturing has become so efficient. Yep. And that data has to go somewhere and it gets computed. And now we're rolling AI into that. So manufacturers need these facilities in order to stay competitive. And I see that as a risk for us in Northwest Ohio. If we don't have these facilities, our manufacturing companies are going to go to places where these facilities exist and they can get the kind of compute power that they need. And on the agricultural side, right? I mean, there's driverless tractors. The seed people are using AI to develop better versions of corn and soybeans. They're telling you when to water, when not to water. They're digesting the environmental information, all those things. So AI actually helps agriculture as well. I think there's a little misnomer that, this doesn't really affect people in rural areas or other places. And I think it affects everybody every day.
And they have drones that can actually tell the condition of the soil that we're using in agriculture. And I think anytime you have a system, organization, operation that is a process, I'm going to argue that some level of compute, maybe not AI AI is such an interesting phrase, but somehow, some way, I think computers are making our operations better. Yes, there's an energy cost because that's just how everything works here. But I think long term, if we apply this stuff correctly in our industries, we're going to be able to drive some of the innovation because a lot of different information, a lot of different data, a lot of different decisions of how we innovate will come from better use of the data. And if we have these systems where we can collect it, process it, use it more effectively, hopefully it leads to that. My question here will be, how can we ensure that our companies are going to benefit from these data centers coming into our backyards?
Well, I think one of the things it does is it allows our companies a couple ways. One, it gives them the computing power that they need. Another interesting thing about a data center is they help bring infrastructure. Okay. So, I think data centers should be, if all things being equal, should be put at the edge of an industrial park. I like to say, that 1,000 acres or 200 acres or 400 acres back there that nobody wanted for one reason or another, because they're going to extend fiber infrastructure, water and sewer infrastructure, electric power infrastructure. They're likely going to build their own substation. They're going to build redundancies. They're going to do all these things that make that industrial park more robust, that make access to that infrastructure for our manufacturers easier and better. And again, it's, when someone starts making an investment to improve something, there may be a company in that park that was, hey, we need to buy our own transformer as well. But it really didn't make a lot of sense. But now someone's coming and going to bring a lot of energy to the park. Yep, we're going to go ahead and make that investment and make our operation better as well. So there's a lot of complementary kind of operations from an infrastructure side. For example, they might be running at the limits of their water and sewer capacity, and maybe it's a food processing plant. They need a lot of sewer in a food processing plant. Along comes a data center that needs a power plant. The sewer system gets upgraded, and now the food processing company can expand in the future as well. So there's a lot of things that benefit the whole ecosystem, if you will. Not to mention, in a case, let's say there is no industrial park, and where data centers look to locate are on those 345 and 765 lines that run throughout Northwest Ohio.
What are those? Can you clarify what those are?
So those are the big electric transmission lines that are on the big towers. They look like erector set towers. If you're a First Energy customer, AEP tends to have a big single metal pole. And a lot of the reason they come through Northwest Ohio is one, geography. So we're at the corner of the lake, right? So everything's got to bend around us through Northwest Ohio. Right. And we're also between all these other metro areas from Chicago to Cleveland, to New York. That whole corridor runs through Northwest Ohio, or north-south from Detroit to Columbus to Cincinnati. So all of that infrastructure, if it's got to go around the Great Lakes, it's got to go through Northwest Ohio. So it's sitting here already. We don't have to build it and go through that expense. So we have that ability to do that. Well, if those towers, let's say they're out in a more rural part of the world, and the water and sewer plant are, 4 miles away. Data centers are the only companies I've come across in my 25-year history in economic development that are willing to pay to extend that infrastructure. That means it's not at a cost to the taxpayer. The government doesn't have to give it away. We don't have to find a grant for it. Where in most cases, manufacturers want a site pad ready for building at no cost to them. And the benefit to the community, or one of those is, that means if you're a resident and you're on a well along that route, you get to tap into that water and sewer system, should you choose, without the cost of having to pay for that. Now, you might still have to pay, there's a local contractor I know, Dick Kilmaniac, does this, and Sons does this kind of work. I don't know what he charges to actually dig the hole and connect your pipe, but it's going to be hundreds of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars for your share of running that infrastructure. And like I said, there's no other industry that we've come across that's willing to make those kinds of expenditures to benefit the community in general.
So there's so much here, Gary. This is awesome. So they're basically improving the neighborhood.
Yeah.
Right, by helping to put in infrastructure. They need some basic infrastructure that does not exist, and them putting it in for themselves is something else that the rest of us can benefit from.
Yeah.
Let's stick here for a second. I think I was at the RGP annual meeting, the last one, and there was somebody talking about our electrical grid, our systems being at least 40 years kind of basically ready for a tune-up, right?
Correct.
Is there anything that's going to happen with these data centers? What the data centers need? Are they going to have to? Are we going to have to improve our electric infrastructure? Is this going to help solve that problem of our grid being 40 years old and needing updates?
I don't know if I have the answer to that. It's a couple things that come to mind from my perspective, and I'm in meetings about, so I can maybe speak to a little bit. One is, if you didn't know this, most of the electrical equipment or most of the electric grade steel in the world was made in Ukraine. All those factories have been bombed by the Russians. And what the Ukrainians can scrap together left, they're not over there making steel for electric transformers in the U.S. They're making tank armaments. So the supply of all this equipment has basically evaporated since the Russian-Ukraine war. Part of the reason, if you are doing a simple project in an existing building and you need a 5 megawatt transformer, it may take you 26 months to get that. That time frame is very difficult for businesses to make decisions on about investment in hiring people in the area. And that, like I said, that's for existing businesses that are already here looking to grow and expand. So there's a need for those kinds of things. And as you add data centers, not only, does that need, hey, and we can talk about the grid a little bit more. Let's just assume they're going to connect to the grid in this scenario. So they need equipment, they need those things. And if you get a cluster of data centers, now you can start to bring behind it the manufacturing that a data center cluster or throughout the Midwest would need. So you're going to need computer server cases made out of steel. You're going to need wiring harnesses. You're going to need all these things that can be made here in Northwest Ohio, many times by companies that already exist and have a footprint and the expertise to do that. Maybe they're making, wiring harnesses for the automobile industry, and now they can make them for data centers. We also hope to attract the manufacturing of electrical grade equipment, not only to serve a data center, but to replace all the aging equipment on our electric grid so that we can start to produce transformers and switch gear and all those kinds of things that we need throughout the country right here in Northwest Ohio. And we hope that will then lead to also manufacturing electrical generation equipment like turbines and combined cycle equipment and all that wonderful kind of stuff that creates electric power that we know we're going to need throughout the country as well.
So if I understand this correctly, right, we have a problem with our energy infrastructure, I think, across this country. Is that fair to say?
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Supply is a little bit of an issue. If data centers move into our region, it's a problem that they can potentially help solve, not necessarily directly, but indirectly, because they're going to have some needs. Those needs will provide opportunity for businesses who are here or businesses looking to move here or looking for opportunity to move here to start meeting that need. We solve this problem for ourselves here. If it's a problem other people have, we may be able then to sell some of these things across the country.
We can export those goods to other parts of the country, certainly throughout the Midwest.
I like to call it importing money versus exporting goods. I mean, it's the same thing, but importing money is where this stuff gets fun, right?
You were at Matt Hireman's county meeting where he was talking about import and export and trading companies. That's kind of the indirect benefit, right? One of the direct benefits is if a data center, this I think is the perfect scenario for us in Northwest Ohio. The data center comes, I'm going to say they, but they don't really do it. A power company does it. We build a power plant for them. And let's say, pick the number, almost, I've not heard of anybody that needs more than a gigawatt of power for a hyperscale data center. So let's just say they need a gigawatt of power. And we build a plant that makes 1.2 gigawatts of power. The idea is that, that 200 megawatts, could go to the grid and help support everybody else. The grid would probably have issues if we start dumping gigawatts of power onto the grid because it wasn't built for that in the way we'd want to do it. But it can take 100 megawatts here, 200 megawatts here, 300 megawatts there, another 100 megawatts over here. And when you disperse those generative, I want to use the word loads, but that's technically when you disperse that generation, it helps the grid get better, all the way around and avoids things that everybody's scared of, like blackouts and all those kinds of things. Not to mention, right, that, under the law, the utility cannot give power to the data center and take it away from your residential customers or a hospital or a school or your grocery store. Those retail operations get power first. That's the PUCO policy, that's state of Ohio law. So, the idea that we're gonna kill everybody's lights because we turn on a data center, I think it's the exact opposite. Because we turn on a data center, we're going to reinforce everybody's ability to keep on lights because we're going to make power. They're not making power in other parts of the country. When you go to Virginia and you read all these horror stories, nobody built a power plant in Virginia to service these data centers. We're trying to balance supply and demand so that we don't impact normal people living their lives in Northwest Ohio.
So help me clarify, where are we we are building a power plant in Northwest Ohio, is what I just heard.
So I got to be careful because I'm talking in the hypothetical and
and you're signing
what could happen.
There's all bunch of stuff. Like we should probably put a disclaimer here. Like all of this is just kind of speculative around everything.
Yeah, this is what we're planning for, right? And I will tell you. So Meta in Wood County was probably one of the. They came in under the wire. They went to First Energy directly and they asked how much power was available. And First Energy said, "Yep, we can get you, I don't know, 100 or 200 megawatts." That gets them started. They're still building a power plant. There's a number of reasons to do that. But, the RGP, Lucas County, we don't have the authority to go stop someone from talking to the utility and asking for power. But what the utility has to do is balance that. And they do a conceptual load study first that says cause problems with interference, with heat, with synchronicity. There's 6 items they look at. They're very technical. It means they don't disrupt the quality of the electrons that flow through the wires and gradually to homes and other places. So by putting that load on or by taking that load off, you're not going to affect the system. After that, you have to do a detailed load study. And this is a study that costs $250,000 that these companies are writing checks for to get the information. Hey, so if we want to take 200 megawatts from the grid specifically at this address, can we do that without causing problems to the grid? And I will tell you, it's the utility's responsibility, and they've told this to people throughout our region. No, you can't do it at that address. And so no data center was built. Like I said earlier, the data centers wanted to be connected. If we go back 4 years, we got to be connected to the grid. Today, data centers are talking about, we could probably do behind the meter power. And there's some really smart people that have designed these plants in a way to be redundant and resilient and all those things. Because I think, frankly, data center companies didn't understand the shape the grid was in.
Right.
If that
plug in an outlet and you got power, right? It's kind of what they were probably
feeding you. That doesn't mean the utility studied the next 10 circuits and said you can get power from all those. And we're talking about, if you talk about transmission power lines, they might go 50 miles before they get to your data center. So you have a truck come off the freeway, hit the tower, the wire goes down. You have a windstorm, ice storm, train hit. All kinds of stuff can make, there's a lot of risk there. Data centers don't like risk. We're talking about running a power line, I jokingly say 5 feet from the power plant to the data center campus. It could also be in a location, maybe there's communities, I could name a few that, hey, we'll host a power plant in our community that we have no problem with that. And we can run the wires then to the data center, within a reasonable distance as well. So a lot of these things have to mirror up. It's one of the reasons it's really difficult to find a good data center site.
Okay, fair. And I think just to clarify a little bit about that, when it comes to like the power in which you brought up, if there's anything that would disrupt that power, a lot of these companies like Amazon and others that are providing these cloud services, in many cases, their contracts are basically guaranteeing that they're going to offer 99.9% uptime and availability. So something like a natural disaster or something happens and causes that, they're obviously going to be open up to litigation, a whole bunch of stuff that they don't want to mess with. So having a battery in their backpack is a lot better than having to get it from a country mile away. Yeah.
And look, one of the great things about kind of building a plant that works in island mode like that. So, you're exactly right, Mike. You kind of need a battery system in there as well. And you know what the greatest thing to feed a battery system is? Solar panels. It is a perfect attribute or characteristic alignment, right? Solar panels can run all day during and generate all that power, and they need a place to put it, and you store it in that battery, and you use it for a couple of things. AI data centers are a lot like a welding shop. The spikes go up and down. It's not a nice constant base load, so the battery can adjust to that very quickly. But then the battery also provides, should something happen and that power plant has to go down for a little bit, you have a battery backup powered by solar panels to keep that data center running. Again, it doesn't affect the grid. This is all off the grid. So they've designed it to live independent.
But then I got to ask this question: why is everybody complaining about their electrical bills going up?
I wish I could put Mark Fry here next to me. So there's a couple things in Northwest Ohio. One of the things that's happened is, if you were in the Northwest Ohio Aggregate Consortium, I think it's called, they had incredible deals for the last 5 years, and those deals are expiring about the same time as we're entering into this world, and a couple other factors I would tell you. So over the last 20 years, electrical demand in the country has gone up about 3% each year. Okay. That from a utilities perspective, that means it's been pretty flat. Okay. Like I said, I was an accountant, so I go 20 years, 3% a year, that's 60%. Now maybe it's not exactly 60%. So I don't know how they measured it each year, but it still went up over 20 years. And we've been able to live through that by putting T5 lighting in industry, by reminding people.
What's T5 lighting?
They're instead of old fluorescent bulbs, they're
just like going to LEDs and low power.
Yeah, LEDs. Okay. So if you think about a 400,000 square foot warehouse, just turning on their lights all day long, you change all those out for T5 lighting, you've saved an incredible amount of money. Okay. People have done that in their homes. We've become energy conservationists.
Yeah, we've got all these low voltage devices versus everything ran on 120.
Exactly. We've become more efficient. I would say over 20 years, we became aware of that. And that was the fat that got cut. And Mark Fry will tell you, we got to the point where we cut all the fat. Now, grid needs infrastructure improvements, or projects come along and I want to be connected to the grid, and they got to build utility improvements. Generally, the utility goes to the PUCO and says, look, we're going to make these improvements because of this project, but these improvements also benefit these communities along the way. And if the PUCO agrees with that, they're able to, the term is socialize that cost. They spread that cost over all their ratepayers because it's benefiting everybody. And so that cost gets rolled into your bill. We have taken down supply, right? We've closed a lot of coal plants. So we don't have as many electrons going on as normal. Again, in Northwest Ohio, we're a little insulated from that. Where I live in Oregon, if you go out in Maumee Bay at night, you see Davis-Besse, Fermi 2, Monroe Power, Fremont Energy, Oregon Clean Energy. There's a lot of power being generated on this end of the lake. That's helped stabilize our costs, but we're not immune to the fact that utilities are going to have to upgrade their system, that we're making less electricity, not more. So there's a supply and demand component. And, people in the town halls we were at were complaining about their bills going up. I think the implication was the data centers are doing it. We haven't turned on a data center in Northwest Ohio yet. So your bill's already going up and you're getting none of the upside of the data center, because the reality is if they build a data center in Virginia or Kentucky or anywhere in the PJM area where we import and export electricity throughout the grid, we're going to bear some burden of that cost. The idea is let's put data centers in Northwest Ohio where we can make power for them, so they don't have to add to the rate base and increase our rates. That doesn't mean the people that build them in Kentucky. I like to say we're not going to reduce prices by increasing supply. We're likely going to decrease the rate of increase of your electric price. And the experts tell me that's about a 3 to 5 year window where this kind of settles out finally, and prices will kind of stabilize again and probably come down a little bit. But during this kind of transition period, remember, we're electrifying automobiles. We're electrifying and automizing and robotizing every industry because we don't have large pools of labor. Another reason a data center is a great fit for Northwest Ohio. I can tell you when Peloton announced they were going to hire 3,600 people, the RGP got a lot of calls from neighboring businesses and said, what the blank are you doing? You helped attract them here. They're just going to take all my employees. Because it's hard to find 3,600 people. But if we're talking about 15 to 20 people with a specialized skill per data center building that get absorbed over 10 years, we can find that talent here in Northwest Ohio, or we can make it. So it doesn't impact all of our manufacturers, service providers, professional providers, right? Your doctor's office will still have a secretary and a receptionist and a medical clerk because they're not going to leave and go work for a data center. They might have left and went and made $36 an hour to build a Peloton bike. That maybe was a real possibility.
Right.
So we think it fits the labor market here in Northwest Ohio as well.
So you said PJM. What was that?
So PJM is I forget what PJM stands for. I should know that. It's the 13 state area that we're part of the national grid. So PJM is our grid operator. In Michigan, it's MISO. Texas has their own. California, Arizona are together, in Utah. So there's about 7 or 8 different grid operators that all roll up to FERC, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. And those grids are all connected. I mean, just to give you an example, Arizona is sending, 20% of the power California needs at nighttime into California. California has a lot of solar arrays. They're able to generate their own power during the day, but when the sun goes down, they need power from Arizona. So it's an amazing thing, our electrical grid, the way that it's balanced, because you just can't make a bunch of power and turn it on. You would burn the wires.
Right.
So PJM is the responsible agency that looks at where are kilowatts being consumed and where are they being produced. It's part of the reason we built peaker plants that run on natural gas, because you can turn them on real quick and shut them off real quick.
Yeah, the balancing of the load is really, really important. The infrastructure, it's just like highways, right?
Yeah.
You've only got so many lanes and only so many cars can go through it. You try to do too much too fast, it turns everything into a mess. So a couple different directions we can go here. Question I have though, let's stick with the power, because I know that is, and the energy costs. This is something that's concerning people. The two things here. Number one, I have read. I trust my sources here a little bit. It does come from the internet, full disclosure.
Yeah.
That some of the data centers that are going in have seen spikes in electrical bills for the population, but there's been some subsidies or some support woven into those deals to help with those spikes. Is that something that's on the table for us here in Northwest Ohio?
I would say everything's on the table, right? I'm not aware of that, and I don't know those details, so I can't really. I mean, I can kind of understand how that happens. I would have told you.
They just know we're coming in. We're going to build this building. We're going to do this thing. It takes so much energy to get a rocket ship off the ground that it will have an impact on supply and those type of things. That they're like, okay, we know we're going to cause this type of a burden here at this liftoff point. Here you go, folks. Here we're gonna ease that burden a little bit.
Yeah, and frankly, I'm the companies we're working with at the RGP understand that and want to offset that. I mean, the idea is not to burden the ratepayers for their infrastructure. Again, that doesn't mean the utility might go, hey, we're going to do a little something over here and it's going to make everything better. And neither the company, the data center company, nor the RGP have control over the utility and how they do that. Another reason why
data center gives you $1 and then the power company does something that costs $2, you're still going up $1, right?
Right. But, again, the data centers understand, they do a poor job of marketing their positive attributes, and they know that. And they really do want to be really good neighbors and stewards and, have as least impact on a community as they can. And you see that a lot of times in the setbacks in the design of their facilities and the buffering and the landscaping and all those kinds of things. But sometimes it gets into these real nuts and bolts where, hey, so if I was aware that something like that was happening in Northwest Ohio, I'd want to have a conversation between the utility and the data center and say, hey, let's talk about this and let's talk about what impact is this going to have on users, and can we enter into some agreement and deal with that? Again, I think that's part of the reason behind the meter power is so important here in Northwest Ohio, because it doesn't cause those kinds of impacts on your bill.
Well, and the people, I shouldn't say this that way, but the easy excuse is sometimes the one that gets picked up, even if it's not true, right? So maybe, with the data centers that come in, they want to provide a little bit of compensation to us for the burden of whatever it is. Like, make sure it's on the bill, make sure it's on your Edison bill. Like, hey, $5 discount from the folks over at Meta or whatever it might be, right? Market it, be very clear and direct of where. I think the big concern, right, is, and we've touched on it here, this is a big amorphous thing that's touching a whole bunch of different places. Like for somebody who's not a technologist, somebody who is reading the news and the Facebook and maybe just seeing some headlines and hearing stories from stuff from 10, 20 years ago, like, to truly understand what's happening here is difficult, even for people like myself, a technologist who does kind of feel like I get it. So, whatever we do here with these companies, how can we better educate the population around what's really going to happen?
Well, I'll give you
the immediate impact, right?
Yeah. I'll give you a funny story too, that you talk about, it's hard to understand your electric bill. I'm an accountant in my property tax bill. I always say the government makes it difficult on purpose so that you just pay it, right? It's hard to challenge all those kinds of things. And I think your electric bill is a lot of, there's an distribution charge, a transmission charge, a tax charge, a kilowatt hour charge, a rider charge, maybe an economic development charge. There's taxes. There's all kinds of stuff in there. And you're like, and now that we're deregulated, you can buy power from anybody else, but your bill comes from First Energy. So how do you understand all those things? But I'll give you a good example of, sometimes community members just kind of biting at that easy apple, if you will. So there was a person in one of these town halls not too long ago was complaining about their electric bills going up. And Mark Fry, who again runs Palmer Energy, is probably the most knowledgeable guy about the electric grid in this region. He probably knows more about First Energy system than First Energy does. So he was intrigued by this person and this problem, and he spent some time talking to the person after the meeting. Remember what month we're in here now. We're going from warm to cold. Turns out this person lives in a house with all baseboard electric heat and no insulation. So I don't think the data center is causing that bill to go up, right? I mean, we just have to be honest about some things in conversations sometimes. And but it sounded good in a public meeting to say, hey, my electric bill went up. Again, the implication that a data center caused it when a data center hasn't even been built yet in Northwest Ohio that's drawing power from the grid. So I'm all for open and fair dialogue with facts and all those kinds of things. And the reality is, right, if communities come together and say, yeah, we don't want this in our community, the RGP is not pushing this down anybody's throat. What I think other things people can't understand is those electric line maps are pretty much public information, and people that engineer for data centers across the country can find those maps, and they look at them too and go, oh my gosh, there's a lot of power lines in Northwest Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why a lot of farmers, a lot of residents, a lot of communities, they're getting a lot of phone calls and letters from people that don't come from Gary Thompson or the RGP. And, I had one farmer, I was talking to him and he's like, can you make this stop? And I said, no, I can't. That's what I'm trying to give you the best. If you want this to stop, this is what you need to tell them, and really I was trying to help that person on the side, but I can't put out a communication to everybody in the country that says, don't bother Farmer Jones.
So let me understand gosh, Gary, there's so much. This may be a 2-hour podcast, dude. I don't know how much time you have, but there's so much here. But like, so okay. When it comes to like RGP's involvement, and then obviously Matt Hireman with Lucas County, correct?
Yes.
And obviously we've got Williams County, Henry County. There's everybody.
Yeah.
There's the CICs. There's the economic development people. Like what you're telling me though is if XYZ Acme data center company wants to come in and can talk to farmer Joe and Jill and buy up all the land that they need and talk to ABC Power and get all the power they need, they don't. I mean, there's regulations though that they have to go through. But RGP has nothing to do with that.
Mike, this is a great. Right. I'm glad you. This gives me a chance to illustrate a great point. So I think there's a lot of people in the community that think these deals are getting done in secret and private, and that's not the case at all. So let's take your case.
Okay.
If the farmland that's owned is already zoned industrial, so I'm going to say M2, then you're probably right. If they have power and they can buy it from the farmer, they can go build a data center. But remember, they could also build a chemical plant, a refinery. They likely could, because you can't deny uses in the code. That's a kind of a law, and it goes to property rights, and it goes to the U.S. Constitution. And not that I'm in favor of this, but the only place most communities allow a strip club is in M2 industrial zoning, because nobody's going to build one there, right? So what I'm telling you is, if you have M2 zone property, even if it's being farmed today, that is any time in the future somebody could build something very nasty there.
Okay.
The data center is a big office building with computers inside of it.
Mm-hmm.
If I had my choice between, and I live in Oregon, Ohio, home to 2 refineries, right? I mean, I love big oil. But if I had my choice to live in a town full of data centers or refineries, I would pick data centers. If I had a choice to put data centers in front of the view of the refineries and power plants and all those ugly things, I would do that, right? It seems to make sense to me. But the reality is, if someone comes and says, hey, we want to buy your land and it's zoned agricultural, they cannot just go build a data center. And this is where the public process occurs. Now, a lot of times the public says, well, we want to stop a data center, but that's not how zoning laws work. The farmer or the interested buyer has to go before the jurisdiction and say, I would like to rezone 400 acres from agriculture to industrial, or whatever would allow for a data center. That's when the community gets input, right? They put signs in the yard. So there's a zoning hearing coming up on this property. Mm-hmm. There's a zoning board made usually of members of the community. They hear pros and cons. And that zoning board, generally how it works, they make a recommendation. That recommendation goes to, either another planning zoning at a regional level, if you're in a township, or maybe a city board. And then a city council or township trustees, elected officials, ultimately get the vote on that rezoning. Rezoning wins in most cases if you looked at the property and everything around it is already zoned industrial. So if you had a U, and hey, this is all, I want to rezone this, chances are that's likely going to get rezoned.
Right.
But if you're going out to pristine farmland and it's just ag land for as far as you can see, you really have to make a case to your elected officials and your public bodies that this rezoning is going to come with a lot of benefits. And the people that make those decisions are answerable to their public in elections, right? So it's a very open and public process. Many times citizens are just frankly busy. I'm taking my kids to soccer practice. I'm helping them study.
I'd love to go all the freaking White House Village Council meetings and know what's going on, but life,
right. That's why we elect people to do those things for us. But every once in a while, you might want to check in with the elected officials. Say, hey, where are we at on this? And again, you can't fault, in Oregon, Ohio, data center developer bought industrial land that the Economic Development Foundation and the city own. They own different pieces of it. It's already zoned industrial. That's why they came looking for that land. Like, wow, this community has already said industrial use is acceptable here.
Okay.
Well, and now there's a number of people, that I don't want a data center. Well, the time to really have that conversation was back when that land was rezoned, some of it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
And most of it unanimously by city council over and over and over again. So,
I think that's something for people to be aware of, right? There's obviously a difference between, some of our urban areas and some of our rural areas when it comes to a lot of this. But our cities, our counties do own property.
Yes.
that they're able to do similar things that
Right.
a private owner could do, right?
Yes. Now they have a little bit, and if the public owns it, there's a little more of a public has a little more control because that's publicly owned. I get to, I can weigh my opinion, and if you don't like it, what the current administration did, you can vote for a different administration in your jurisdiction.
Well, let's stick here then and talk about two things, right? So, if me as a community member gets to have a say, and one of the things I'm hearing concern about is we're obviously concerned about the water. The Maumee River has had its issues. Lake Erie's had some of its issues. Like that is, if I'm going to argue why we are such a beautiful place to live, that's one of the two of the reasons it is such a beautiful place to live, right? So there's concerns on what this might do to the water. There's another concern that I've heard, and I have myself, I can hear my refrigerator running with the electricity that's kind of going through it. Do the noise pollution potentially from these data centers. I know that there are, we can write laws kind of for anything as part of these deals with regards to the amount of decibel levels,
right?
That are at the kind of the gate of these facilities. But all these regulations, everything's great. But then you've got like a company, and I won't name them, but just down the road in Napoleon that did some stuff into the river that, like we've been burned on some of these things before. So our population, how are we going to make sure that our natural resources and our quality of life aren't going to be negatively impacted in some ways from these things?
So I want to back you mentioned something I want to talk about. So natural resources, right? I'm going to come back to water, but I want to start with natural gas. So most of the natural gas we get to make this power that would power these data centers, or frankly heat your homes or any other development we want to do, is going to come from the Marcellus and Utica shale that's at the West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania border. And we have, I hate the term unlimited, so I'm going to say there's 100-year supply of natural gas there. I think there's more, and they're fracking. Appalachian, Ohio has seen an incredible amount of wealth increase because of this natural resources. And our region, and I'm going to tackle this one too, the Nexus pipeline and the Rover pipeline went into those fields, and they're coming through Northwest Ohio. Those pipelines don't stop at our state border. So we have the ability here in Northwest Ohio, because it's very convenient and the infrastructure is built already, to utilize that resource from Southwest Ohio that's piped through one of those pipelines to make power to really enrich our communities here in Northwest Ohio. And if we don't do that, the strategic risk, that gas is going to go to Indiana, Illinois, Michigan, Canada. Those pipes we're going to take a bioresource. Yeah. And we're going to enrich other people. And, the Nexus pipeline, I don't understand why they did what they would. They went around, told everybody you're going to get X number of dollars. And so just for sake of argument, I'm going to say they went and told everybody you're going to get $100 and you're only getting 40. One thing, if you don't understand, at the time that was done, and this law just changed, pipelines are taxed at a rate of 88%. So if you were taxed at 88%, I think you would probably go make all the arguments you could to get taxed at a reasonable rate as well. But I would say this to communities that are getting $40. What were you getting before the pipeline came through? You were getting nothing. And it didn't cost you anything to build a pipeline. You didn't have to put out any cash. You're not at risk. The pipeline company came through and did that. Now, the fact that they promised you 100 and only paid you 40, that's shame on them. And, I don't know how to account for that. That's not how we do business.
We see that kind of in economic development kind of all over the place. Like the companies will come in and throw out this big pie in the sky number. And then, the casino, the lottery was supposed to save the schools. The casino was supposed to do all like, that's just nature of, I think, the beast, right? Is you overpromise on some of these things.
I'm going to stop because this is important, and we'll go within, we can get to water. Or maybe we'll do water on another podcast. Most of the times, whether the RGP is working with a company or Lucas County by the way, Lucas County isn't the only hotbed for data. I probably shouldn't say this, but they're looking throughout our whole 17 county region. So lots of municipalities are probably going to benefit from these things. And you'd like to see people take advantage of the moment instead of let the moment go by and go, wow, how come we don't ever get any development? Or how come our budget is in trouble? Or how come we have to pay for trash or, all those kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
But on the economic development side, most times manufacturers come to a community, whether it's through Jobs Ohio, a county official, the RGP, and they're very demanding. Like I said, hey, we want a pad-ready building site for free.
Mm-hmm.
And you told me you don't have enough water and enough sewer, so you guys have to go pay for that. You have to pay to extend those electric lines. You have to pay to do that. I want a grant to train my workers. Generally speaking, and I don't mean to besmirch manufacturers, but they demand a lot and they will take it all.
Okay. Data
centers, okay, what we're doing is flipping instead of a manufacturer coming to a community and say, you have to do all these things or we're not coming. And I've heard, there's a bell curve, there's good and bad. On the bad side, I've heard companies say things like, hey, if you want to be an automotive state, you got to win automotive projects. So you better give us all we want or we're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
I don't like doing business like that. But what I'm saying is we as communities, that's how we should talk to the data centers. So we've introduced a number of legal counsel to a number of communities here. And we've told them, you need to write the agreement. Don't sit and wait for the data center to come tell you what you want to do. You tell them. You can make assumptions on value and run property tax calculations. You can look at hiring rates. You can form JES. You can get construction wages. You can do all these things. And you need to do that to protect yourself. And there's some very interesting elements of the law and a contract that sometimes don't occur in economic development agreements. So the community has to have some consideration in the deal. And when they do, those agreements become legal binding in a court. So if the company says, you know what, we're not going to pay that anymore. Well, guess what? We're going to go to court. And because we gave up 200 acres for you and we did this and we did this and we did this, you're going to owe us that money because that's what the judge is going to say. And there's a lot of case law in these facts. And again, it's about writing that agreement from the community's benefit point of view and sliding that across the table to the data center and saying, if you're not willing to agree to these things, thanks for the meeting. It was nice meeting you. We've got 4 other data centers waiting out in the hallway that are willing to commit to these kinds of things. So it's about the community taking control and protecting themselves legally so that they get what they want.
And those are community benefit agreements, CBAs.
They can be called all kinds of things,
okay.
Right? We generally refer to them as economic development agreements.
Okay.
It might be rolled into I'm going to say property tax abatement agreement, but the only reason you do an abatement is that helps you share the revenue the way you want to do it. You're not given an abatement to let the company get out of paying tax. So,
and that may be some money that's going to go to the school, and levies are a big hot button issue here that may reduce some of the there's all kinds of things we could do with these. Correct.
Yeah. When you get the money from the data center in this way, the local jurisdictions get to figure out how they want to split it up. Okay. So I often say, like, if a $1 billion hyperscale is coming to your community, and you have a neighboring village and it's a township and there's a school district, if we're going to put a pot of anywhere from, I hate to give numbers because it depends on what happens, right? But let's just
use monopoly money. Use monopoly money.
Between $5 and $20 million a year is going to go on the table. If your jurisdictions can't figure out how to split that equitably, they probably don't deserve the money. That's the way I say it. But this, in some cases, the potential revenue is greater than the annual budgets of townships. It can be as 10 to 20% of the budget of a school system. And that's all driven by the value. What I can tell you in general terms, these buildings are valued at about 4 times the value of any other building in your community. So 4 times higher than a hospital, 4 times higher than an office building, 4 times higher, certainly than a warehouse.
Per square foot or?
Yeah. So when that value gets that high, it creates a lot of revenue when you go through the property tax calculation. And that's where these big sums of money come through. So what you have to do as a community is protect yourself. Don't leave it up to the data center to tell you what you're going to get. Do these calculations. I don't think Google's going out of business, right? If they come to your town, they're a Fortune 10 company. They have a really big balance sheet. They're going to make those payments.
I thought that these data centers weren't paying property taxes.
Well,
because the tax part of this is a little amorphous for everybody as well. Can you
yes.
illuminate this?
Well, depends how you do it. So you could say, no, you just got to pay property tax. Generally, the data centers want some kind of tax agreement. And the reason they want that is that number's so big, they want certainty. And they want certainty for as long as they can. They're not necessarily trying to get off cheap. But if your community passes a new levy every 6 months, they don't want that cost to just keep going up and up and up for a number of times. So they like to lock that in.
Okay.
Again,
so
they're locked.
This is better when things are stable, when their costs are stable.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And they're locking that in at an amount. I'm just going to say it. I've done a lot of these agreements with people. When I see the amounts data centers are paying to communities, I've never seen this kind of revenue. Sometimes I do the calculations and estimates. The numbers frighten me. I call the companies and say, if I did my math right, this is what your number is. And they go, yeah, that's about where we thought it would be. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
they're dealing.
Again, I don't want to give any
They're dealing with
specifics.
billions. They're dealing with billions, and global consumers. They're not dealing with our traditional. Even our biggest companies here are not serving the amount of people that these companies are serving.
Yeah.
Fair?
So the only tool we currently have in the economic development toolbox to take a big pot of money, and make sure we can split it amongst groups. So in a lot of cases, that whole big pot of money, and this is going to would all just go to the school for the most part, right?
Okay.
Well, if the city owns land, why are they going to sell land to somebody if they don't get any revenue out? But because the pot of money is so big, the school can still earn revenue and the city can still earn revenue, and everybody wins. The only tool that lets us do that right now is what's called a pilot payment, a payment in lieu of taxes. Okay. In order to do a pilot payment, you have to enter into a property tax abatement agreement.
Okay.
That's just the law. That's not anything the RGP did, Weakless County did. That's been the law for a very long time in the state of Ohio. You don't have to give 100% abatement. You might give 100%. You might give 50%. You might give 75%. If you give a 75% abatement, that means 25% of that number still gets paid out how it normally would. Again, those negotiations are up to your community elected officials, and I would hope that they have good legal advice, because they're going to be negotiating with companies that do this every day for a living. And again, the motivation of those companies isn't necessarily to get the cheapest, it's to get the longest term of certainty that they can.
Yeah.
So it's a negotiation that most communities in Northwest Ohio in particular have not been part of, and would have very little experience in this kind of conversation. Again, that's
why we're afraid. I mean, some people are afraid of this, right? Or it's that lack of understanding, right? So are the conversations then at the county level?
Village, it's going to be with the village. If you're in a city, it's going to be with the city. If you're in a township, it's going to be likely with the township. The townships tend to lean on the county they're in for, the prosecutor is their attorney. So they'll lean on the county for some legal advice. But it's those local officials at the very local level that really get to make those decisions and negotiate those agreements with companies. So it's not the RGP doing it. I'm not in those rooms. There's a few attorneys I like because I know who's going to sit on the other side of the table, and you need to have an attorney that has the same expertise, knowledge, and experience so that you're equally matched. Frankly, the idea of giving incentives to a data center, that's not, the incentive is we have the ability to make power for them. That's all the incentive they need.
Well, and we what do we have? We've got natural gas, we've got water, we've got flat land, and we have very, very few, if any, natural disasters. Knock on wood. I mean, that's the quadfecta of why they love us, right? Yeah. And our location. So it's a quinteffecta, if that's the word.
And the quick thing on water, Mike, I like boating. I like the Lake Erie Islands. I don't want anything to happen to me. I like drinking water, right? So, and I think most people do. I've not yet found a person that says, hey, I don't, I'll drink Gatorade. There's a movie or something about that. Really.
Well, there's bath time. My son might say he doesn't like water, but he really does.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the city of Toledo's municipal water and sewer system has 70 million gallons of excess capacity a day.
What does that mean?
That's a big number. What that means is Toledo built a system that focused on its city limits in, and every resident of Toledo has been using less water for the last 100 years. And Toledo's been losing population, so there's fewer people. So they built this big plant so they got a Ferrari sitting in their garage that they never get to drive. I mean,
or they go 20 miles an hour when they do.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And if they sell that capacity, the city of Toledo can make revenue.
Okay.
That would help the city of Toledo's budget, right?
Right.
And the city of Toledo can sell that a couple ways. They could run pipes to spots. They could run a pipe and connect, say, if you're in the Northwest Water and Sewer District system. So they could provide water and sewer for that system. And that system goes, throughout a big chunk of northern Wood County, and really almost into Hancock County as well. They could feed. Oregon has 16 million gallons a day of capacity. Fremont has capacity. Fostoria has capacity. Genoa has a little bit of capacity. And so, again,
sorry, I got to stop you, Gary. Is that processing capacity or actual extra water?
So it's processing capacity. So let's just stick with the city of Toledo, one example. They're permitted to process, I don't know what the total number is, but whatever, let's say they're permitted to process 100 million gallons a day. Mm-hmm. They're only processing 30. So under their current permits with Ohio EPA and the Great Lakes Compact and all the things, all the regulatory bodies they have to answer to, they can process 70 million gallons more of water and sewer per day.
Okay.
We're talking about data centers that use, again, we like closed loop data centers, and data centers have gone to this system because, as my friend Will Turner said in the town halls, this open tap where you just run water through to cool, that's not a good system, and it gave data centers a bad name, and they don't want to have a bad name. So we're talking about a data center that will use 20 to 30,000 gallons to fill up a closed loop system when we have 70 million gallons of excess capacity. We are not going to impact anybody's water.
Okay.
If you want to have fun, Mike, just Google how much water evaporates off Lake Erie each day.
Right. Well, and
it's a lot.
And the water that's being used is for cooling purposes.
Correct.
For computers.
Correct. Now they will in a closed loop system, they'll put glycol in there.
Okay.
But it doesn't run out to the sewer. Yeah, it doesn't run out to the sewer. It runs through the system. They'll tap it off. I imagine, I'm no expert in this, but I imagine every 5 years or so, they do have to flush it. They'd have to capture the glycol out of it and get rid of that in an appropriate way. And I'm sure that's regulated. And then they would refill it. So, let's say every 5 years, they got to use 30,000 gallons again.
But it's not like they're putting oil mist or they're dumping sludge or processed freaking from food processing in it. It's just used to cool.
Correct.
It's just cooling because these computers run hot.
Right. And and they're finding better ways to cool them all the time. So the bigger water user would be if we build power plants. And I will tell you, the power plant industry is getting away from using a power plant can use 300,000 gallons a day.
Mm-hmm.
That's 10 times more water than the data center used one time, but it still doesn't compare to the 70 million gallons of capacity we have just in the city of Toledo, right? So again, we're not going to impact people's water. And the power plant generally lets that off as steam. Everybody thinks it's pollution, but it's just water vapor that comes out of the cooling towers.
You mean out of Fermi? That's not radiation coming up?
No, my kids, when they were little, used to say, hey, the cloud maker's on today. They're making cloud. And if you notice, Monroe Power, the refineries in Oregon, everybody has put scrubbers on their system and out of all those scrubbers that capture a lot of pollutants, that water vapor is coming out. So it's a sign. I mean, the air has never been cleaner in Northwest Ohio. The water's never been cleaner. And we want to keep it that way. And again, attracting high-tech data centers that are non-polluters seems like a much better way to do that than the chemical precursors to the EV battery industry, for example.
Yeah.
Which is another whole sector.
Bring some money in, but not some of the pollution and problems. I mean, there's obviously going to be some level of noise pollution. I mean, that's just part of electric plumbing.
Everybody says that. People that say that, I tell them, drive down Beach Road in New Albany, Ohio. I was there today. Mm-hmm. I got out of my car, stood in front of a data center. I don't hear any noise. Okay, maybe I'm losing my hearing.
How old are you, Gary?
I'm 55. So, maybe it's going, but I don't. Again, the data center people I know will say, yeah, 30 years ago, these things were loud and noisy. We had all these pumps, all these things. One of the other benefits of natural gas is we can run up backup generators on natural gas as well, and not diesel generators. So we're taking the whole diesel supply chain and cost out of the mix of a data center in Northwest Ohio. A lot better for the environment and all kinds of things.
If you're that concerned as a community about the noise, then the agreement that your municipality writes says at the border it's 55 decibels, and if not, you're going to do something to remediate that, either with more trees or some type of attenuation.
Yeah, and I think that the general method is everything that makes noise today on a data center, they enclose it with sound dampening walls. Yeah. So it's like being in a sound booth, right? If we're going to put that, because it's amazing.
So there's one other thing I want to talk about, and I know we've gone an hour and 10 minutes, Gary. We could talk forever. Are you okay to go one more thing?
I'm sure.
Topic?
Absolutely.
One more topic. And this is near and dear to my heart. The education and workforce development, right? I know, and you've said it, and I think it's common knowledge. These things will rely on skilled trades to be built. After that, we're talking 100-ish, maybe, high-paying jobs for people to operate the data centers. Yes, there's going to be obviously people maybe that need to do like the security level and those things, maybe another 50 to 100 jobs there. And I think I heard, and I'm allowed to say this, Meta coming into Wood County is giving some money to Otsego schools.
Yes. And Eastwood and Penta Center.
And Penta, did you say?
Yeah, I believe Penta is part of that agreement. It all depends when the construction touches their jurisdiction.
So, and I know, I don't know this, but Jobs Ohio, I think there's some level of workforce development that y'all are connected to, or they are connected to.
Yes.
What do we need to be thinking about here for our local schools, from K-12 all the way up to obviously BG, UT, Lords, Owens, Northwest State, even Defiance, right where I'm at? And from the educational perspective, where should we be putting our brains and maybe our dollars?
Yeah. So what
should we be asking for as part of these deals?
You probably know this better than I, because I was out of town during AI week. But, if you just think about Bowling Green State University having a AI enhanced degree for everybody that leaves that institution, that is some great forward thinking, that, not only on the part of Dr. Rodney Rogers, but on the whole staff and everybody that got behind that. So that's amazing. I talk about workforce this way. The first thing I think that happens when we put companies like Meta and Google and Apple and Microsoft in Northwest Ohio, probably my kids or someone's grandkids, instead of taking a job in Charlotte, Columbus, Chicago, Boston, Nashville, we got a really good chance of keeping them here, because they have the opportunity to work for a tech company of the name they recognize. The other thing I think we have the opportunity, we have great institutions here, local. I mean, BG, UT, Ohio Northern, a lot of private schools, a lot of Owens Community College, Sterritt Tate Community College. I always hate naming them because I always get it.
You leave one or two out,
right? And somebody sends me an email, hey, you forgot my school. So, Heidelberg University, let me see if I could touch on all cases of them. But remember, if we go 40 minutes to the north, we got a powerhouse institution in the University of Michigan there. I don't care who you root for on Saturday. You can't deny it.
They're closer than Columbus.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of kids there. Yeah. 2.5 hours away is the Ohio State University. I don't care who you root for. You know what? Guess what? A lot of kids from Northwest Ohio go to Ohio State. Yeah. When's our best chance to get them to come back? Right when they start to graduate, right? We have two chances. If we have a job for them when they graduate, they're likely to come back. Or they might decide, hey, I'm going to spread my wings and I'm going to stay in Columbus or go somewhere else. And then when they start to have a family, we really have a good chance to get them back. But we need to have an opportunity for them to come back too. And I'm going to think a little bit different here. Okay. But I know kids that leave Northwest Ohio and go to Purdue and go to Carnegie Mellon. All these schools, we are in the middle of this. I say we're in the middle of the Big Ten and the MAC, but the Big Ten can't count. So their schools got more than 10 and it crosses the whole country. So it doesn't mean as much as it used to. And it's the MAC with 1A, if you're familiar with that other MAC in the East Coast. But there's a lot of schools, Ohio University, Eastern Michigan University, where we can get this talent. And because if we develop a cluster of these companies, those schools are going to interact with it. So Meta they've been interacting with Bowling Green State University from the day they announced they were coming to Middleton Township.
Right. And
they're doing a lot of things. They're giving grants out to the community already. So we need to focus on things like software development, computer engineering, computer science,
data engineering,
data, and
cybersecurity.
you know those jobs better than I do. But what I do know is we should roll that down into our community college, so somebody could get a certification in data center operations, because that's $100,000 to $150,000 a year that you can have with an associate's degree, and it's a little more hands-on than maybe thinking about how to program a log.
It's going to be more vocational, I would argue, at some level than a computer science degree would be.
Right. Right. We call that career tech now in Ohio, career technical education, right?
Yeah.
So our community colleges can do that. Our community colleges can ramp up electrical engineering, telecom wiring, all those kinds of things. Our trades people could do the same. They can, we need more electricians if we're going to have more data centers. We need more people to do wiring. We need more people for security systems. We need all those kinds of things. So those jobs roll all the way down. And at some point, I always think at the grade school level, I don't know, 5th, 6th, 7th grade, kids should be given these aptitude tests and interest tests to see where their future might align, and they can go somewhere and be successful in a career. Budgets got cut in public education, but when I was in public education and when I was in grade school, we made field trips all the time to businesses. We had speakers come in all the time to classrooms. And I think a lot of that's missed. I think a lot of that's getting ramped back up. So Sandusky County, for example, does a great job of taking parents and high school juniors and seniors, and they might even do freshmen and sophomores now. Just for effect, they put them on a yellow school bus and they take them around to all the businesses in Sandusky County, so that you can see, if you want a manufacturing job, this is what manufacturing looks like today. If you want a public accounting job, here's a public accountant. This is what this looks like today. If you want to be in management, if you want to do these kinds of things. And I think our industry needs to get much more supportive and much more in touch with our educational systems. That would be my plea.
Yeah, you and I, we'll do another 1.5 hour podcast on how we fix up.
I'm married to an educator, so I got a lot of views on this by osmosis.
Very nice. Yeah, and that may be, they've been talking about since Sir Ken Robinson's TED Talk 20 years ago, whatever it's been about. We're supposed to have this big, huge disruption in education that's going to change anything, and it hasn't really happened. This might actually have to be it, just because of how it's impacting us in education directly, not just on students using papers to do their homework or AI to do their homework, but the reality of what the future of work looks like and the impact these technologies are going to have. So the other thing I'm going to say about education in Northwest Ohio is, I taught out at Northwest State for 7 years. And when I went out there, under the impression, I came from Monroe. I've been a couple of different places. My impression was all the kids were going to want to get the heck out of Northwest Ohio, right? What was amazing is I found 70% of my students wanted to stay.
Yeah.
They just needed a reason to stay. And maybe something like this could end up, maybe they don't want to go work in the data center, but from the research I've done, there are businesses that will pop up around the data center, adjacent to the data center. That could be opportunities, not just for your kids that like ones and zeros, computers and data, but other things as well. So I'm the eternal optimist. I'm a Lions fan.
Let me give you a little food for that optimism.
Yes.
So I have a friend that runs the State Department of Economic Development in Wyoming.
Okay.
Guy in Wyoming, a few years ago, maybe 10, 12 years ago, had 0 tech jobs. I mean, I'm sure there were a few, but for all intents and purposes, it did not register if you ran like Bureau of Labor Statistics analysis on it. Along comes some data centers because they have power in Wyoming. Today, there are tens of thousands of computer programmers, computer engineers, computer scientists, software developers. They attribute all that. Portland, Oregon kind of had the same thing. They attribute all of those tech jobs to data centers. What I would tell you, right? So let's just say we're going to try to find a 750-acre hyperscale site. That's really hard to do inside the city limits of Toledo, Ohio. Toledo, Ohio gets beat up a lot. In the media, on the radio, hey, why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Well, Toledo's built out, right? And it's really difficult to go take a bulldozer and start mowing down neighborhoods. You go to Wood County where you still have all the amenities of Lucas County and all the population, but there's a lot of open flat land, so that's part of the reason Wood County wins a lot of these projects, because they have the space to do that. I give Brandon Selhorst and his team a lot of credit, the Mayor Kapskevich a lot of credit. They're focusing on what they can. They're winning the things they can do, and they're working really hard to make industrial sites. I mean, the development of Jeep Overland is with the Port Authority's help, it's just a case study. That's really, really tough economic development work, and they don't come every day, those wins. So I applaud them for what they're doing. But let's say 10,000 new white-collar tech jobs come to Northwest Ohio. My guess is a large percent of them are going to take office space in downtown Toledo.
Yeah.
So again, Middleton Township may win this great, and Wood County may win this great investment. Downtown Toledo is likely going to be the recipient of a lot of tech jobs there. If a data center goes in Lima or outside Lima, my guess is downtown Lima is going to get some tech jobs. If it goes in Hancock County, Findley's going to get tech jobs. Middleton, I bet Bowling Green is going to see some new tech firms pop up because of Meta. So there's a ripple effect from just the data center that benefits the entire region. And we talked already about the type of manufacturing that can come as well. So we got a white collar benefit and a blue collar benefit, or a knowledge economy benefit and a work with your hands economy benefit, however you want to describe it. All that comes from landing a few data centers.
And, that is, you're selling the dream, right? That's the dream of what this thing could be. And then from what I heard earlier in our conversations, our population just needs to make sure that they're at the table and making sure that their leaders are structuring these deals in order to make sure we're getting as much benefit as possible. Because I will argue to the day I die that, we got to move past this. If Henry County gets something, Williams County didn't. It's us as a region together. The only way they're going to take us seriously with the other three C's is if we start actually acting like as a region together in order to be able to complement those three C's.
Yeah, you're correct. So I tell people in these conversations, I just had a conversation. I was driving up today and someone said, what are the disadvantages? And I had to drive about 20 miles before I called someone back. I said, okay, here's what in full disclosure, here's what I think the disadvantages are. First, if you're a person that just thinks every ounce of farmland should stay farmland forever, I can't overcome that argument. That is your view, and you're entitled to it. I don't even know that I disagree with it. That's not my job. But hey, that's your view. We're going to disagree, maybe. Okay, I like having a Chili's restaurant that I can visit or something. All those kinds of things. So I can't overcome if your view is nope, we need to just stay agricultural. I also can't overcome really if especially if land is rezoned. Like if you bought a house across the street from a land that was zoned industrial already, someone should have told you to do your homework. The city, somebody should have said, hey, all that field you're looking at is going to be industrial one day. Yeah. So I feel a little bit for you there. The person I really feel for is the person, I bought land across the street from ag land, and that ag land just got rezoned to industrial because there's big power lines running through it. Yeah. And so unless the data center or some other development buys you out at a price that you like, even if they buy you out at a price you like, you still maybe have to go build a new house. I mean, it's just a pain.
Yeah. Inconvenience.
It's inconvenience. I can't, the best I can give you is say, I'm sorry about that. You got to deal with your community and maybe they won't rezone the property. But those are arguments I can't overcome. The other one that is a little bit of a downside, and I think it's a temporary, it causes ruffles in the marketplace. So part of the reason data centers are able to get land from farmers is they essentially overpay for the land.
Okay.
So a farmer, especially if you have 100 acres or 200 acres, in Northwest Ohio today, farmland probably goes anywhere between $15,000 and $25,000 an acre. In Oregon, Ohio, the price was set at $90,000 an acre. If you're a farmer and your kids aren't going to farm and they move to Charlotte and Columbus, and your choice is I'm going to sell this to my farmer next door or lease it out, or I can collect $90,000 an acre and have generational changing wealth, they have the right to do that. What that does, though, the first thing it does is it makes everybody think land in pick your county is now worth $90,000 an acre.
Right.
And that's not true.
Right.
Only land that's suitable for a data center would be worth $90,000.
Yeah.
And again, I would say that land is 200 acres either side of that big power line or either side of that big natural gas line.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not sitting in those pockets, your land's worth what it was. That doesn't mean you shouldn't try to get more for it if you're selling it. So I think data center development causes a short-term disruption in sales price of land, especially ag land. But again, if the community says emphatically, hey, we're going to allow this tract of land to develop, and this is all going to stay agriculture, well, you've kind of set the boundary on the pricing there as well. Because, so a community can help itself through that problem. And who you really feel for in that problem is kind of the maybe younger farmer who's trying to acquire farmland. And he was planning on getting it at $12,000 an acre. And now, crap, I got to compete against $90,000 an acre. So over time,
there go our food prices then too, right?
Over time, that'll work out. I mean, I think farmers have gotten farmers are pretty smart people, and they're pretty darn efficient at growing food and processing it. Even I think they're going to, this year was not a good year because of drought and other things, but somehow they all survive and they get through. And, and the whole scope of things, we're talking about taking out, a 0.00% of farmland out of the state of Ohio for industrial development. And, it's along the routes of the infrastructure, right? You got to have good highway access. You got to have good power access, all those kinds of things. So I like to be pretty emphatic about, I don't have any desire, nor does the RGP, about paving over all of our ag land. I mean, ag is a big business here, and we like to keep it that way.
So, Gary, this has been phenomenal. We could probably go on, but it's been 90 minutes. So I don't know how I'm going to edit this. I'm probably going to put out just the long form version and then maybe chunk it up here and there. But so I just want to clarify. So, what's RGP's role in this?
So our role is twofold. On the supply side, we're here to help communities understand what they're getting into with a data center and a power plant, and to make sure they protect themselves.
Okay.
They have to determine if they want it or not, right? But when you start talking about the kind of tax revenue that they generate, most elected officials at least want to evaluate it. And I think the public should be glad that their elected officials, hey, I'm going to at least hear this out. I'm not just going to say no or yes right away. I'm going to hear this out and see if this fits. So they're doing their job by entertaining these conversations as an elected official. We help with that. On the demand side, we're the people that are out looking at economic development trends, what type of projects are coming in the future. And that started maybe 7 years ago with this conversation about data centers and other things. And that's led us to, we now have relationships with all these companies and the consultants that they deal with. And our job at the RGP is to attract new investment from outside the region to the region. And data centers, from our perspective, seem to be a very good way to do that. So those are the two things that we're doing in this data center space.
And then, as I mentioned at the start here, we'll close here. There were a couple town halls last week. I believe one right next to me at Anthony Wayne High School.
Yes.
And then was there one in Oregon recently as well?
There was a town hall meeting. It really was for Oregon residents to talk to the developer directly and get their questions and concerns answered and heard.
Okay. And you attended those, or at least got some
feedback? Yeah, I was part of the panel in Anthony Wayne, and I just attended the one in Oregon.
So you can talk to the people who weren't there or who were there. Sometimes you have a conversation or you sit on a panel and you walk out there. I wish I would have said that, right?
Yeah.
Are there any things that you wish you would have said there or want to restate from there to kind of not close out the conversation, but end this portion of the conversation around data centers in Northwest Ohio? Yeah.
Mike, thanks for giving me that chance. I mean, I think the one thing I would say, again, I've gotten a lot of emails and questions from people, they're very detailed questions about regulatory things, like what's going to do with the water and how much is this going to happen and who's going to control this. Again, I would just reiterate, as the Oregon developer said, no company can come to town and do something that violates the law, whether that's the federal Clean Air Act and Water Act, whether it's your local building and zoning code or other local ordinances that your community may pass to protect themselves. against what they see as a threat of a data center or something a side effect. The RGP, I can't tell you how they're going to monitor the EPA. The EPA does that. That's not my job. But these are very regulated businesses, and they have to live up to those laws.
That's it?
That's it.
Oh, let's go. All right, Gary, this has been a phenomenal conversation. I learned quite a bit, and I just appreciate the time to talk to me. I talk to everybody, or I talk to a lot of people, so now I'll be better equipped to tell some of the story here a little bit more accurately with a little bit more detail on data centers. So loved having you on and would love to talk to you again. Definitely.
Anytime. You know how to get a hold of me.
All right, Gary.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, no problem. Everybody, it was Gary Thompson, the Executive Vice President for Regional Growth Partnerships, aka RGP. That's your title, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then me, Mike Vanderpool, Make It Happen podcast, talking to cool people doing cool things. Data centers seem pretty cool. I'm sure that there's some people who will end up in the comments disagreeing with me, but such is life. All right, folks, let's keep the conversation civil. Let's make sure we're all continuing to learn and grow for these opportunities, not just for us old heads in the room, but also like thinking about the future and what a region with a foundation in technology might mean as opportunities for our kids. I'll kind of leave it there. So, all right, everybody, thank you. Be good to each other.